Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Sundays. My name is Everett Deemer and I've stolen the keys from old Dave. He pushed the captain's chair out of the way and we're going to take this spaceship for a joyride. We welcome to tonight's show, Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio. If you want to listen to our archives, they are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do Dave a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping the Spaced Out Radio store, reading up on the SOR Newswire, and so much more. And right now, Dave has posted a blog there regarding some UFO news that I think is really important that people to take a look at, and I'd really encourage you to go over there and give it a quick read. Tonight's show is brought to you by Mighty Moose Beard Oil Company. It's 100% Canadian and 100% natural. They're taking care of beards around the world. Visit MightyMooseBeard.com and use promo code SOR19 today. Tonight, we're joined by Denver Michaels. Denver is a researcher and author who has written about a bunch of different topics, from lake monsters and weird and wild West Virginia to legends that he's seen on road trips. His most recent book, El Paso to Las Cruces via Roswell, was released this summer and explores the strangeness of the American Southwest, which I'm excited to get into. So Denver, thanks for coming to my first show before I get fired.
Well, it's an honor that you asked me to be your first guest. So I'm just, really hoping that I don't sink you.
Oh, I'm sure you won't. I'm glad you're here because you and I have a little bit of a history. I'm glad to call you a friend, and you have some fantastic books. I just wanted to say thanks for showing up for me.
Well, I appreciate that, man, and I'm sure we'll have fun tonight.
Oh, I hope so. Now, I've known you for a little bit, and you're kind of a nuts and bolts guy. I mean, I know what you do for a living. How did you get into kind of the paranormal?
I just have always been kind of, I guess, predisposed to it for whatever reason. I've just always, since I was a little kid, I've just always had an interest in weird things. And I can't really explain it because, growing up in southwestern Virginia, as a youth, my parents at the time were, real Bible believing Christians, and we went to church all the time and stuff like that. So it's almost out of character for me to to be interested in this kind of stuff. But from an early age I was. I can remember clear as day. Back in the I'm 46 or almost 46. So back in the day I was probably 6 years old, watching an episode of Super Friends, and I remember that Universe of Evil episode where there was an evil Superman from a parallel universe, and an evil Aquaman, and an evil Wonder Woman that crossed over into our universe, and it just freaked me out so bad, and just made me. It's really maybe weird and kind of stupid to point to a cartoon, but man, that cartoon really stuck with me, and I always wondered about parallel universes and things like that. And and in middle school I was checking out books in the school library about ESP, astral projection and just weird things like that. And I don't know, man, I just always had an interest in this stuff, and I don't really know why.
Did you have any experiences as a kid? Usually people that get interested in this kind of topic, they have some sort of experiences in their past. Did you have any as a kid?
I can't say for sure that I did. I do remember thinking that I saw, a green man with glowing red eyes. I was on vacation with my parents down in the Smoky Mountains. I think we were on the North Carolina side of the Smoky Mountains. And anyway, I thought I saw this entity. I don't remember how old I was. Maybe probably somewhere around 7, 8 thereabouts. And I thought I saw and I mean, it really scared me bad, and I remember telling my mom about it the next day, and she was just kind of like, that liars go to hell, right? And so, I just kind of shut up about it and put it away. and that might have been just one of those things that, just a kid, maybe I was just having a weird dream. Who knows? But I didn't really have any of those real life-changing experiences like a lot of people have. And it's one of those things that I just always been interested in this stuff, but I can't really point to anything in particular, though.
Okay. Well, when did the desire to become a writer or the urge to write kind of develop?
Well, I have always really enjoyed writing, and it's like everything else. You get out of school, you start your family, this or that, and just all that other noise gets kind of pushed aside. You're out there making a living, doing what you got to do to keep the bills paid, driving back and forth to baseball practice and this and that. And yeah, I guess as my kids got kind of older and they started driving, and things kind of slowed down a little bit as far as the raising the family stuff goes. I mean, I had a pretty good job. I had a great wife, great kids, but I just felt like, man, something's just missing. And I kind of knew that I really wanted to pursue writing. And I did. I decided that, I was, especially now with, being able to self-publish so easily and things like that, I just decided to just go for it.
Did you always write about the paranormal, or is there some Denver Michaels fiction out there, or something like that?
I've got some fiction books in my head, but I haven't really put them down on paper yet. No, the first book I decided. And it was a pretty easy decision for me. I knew I wanted to write something, along the lines of cryptozoology or paranormal, but more in the cryptozoology kind of field. And it was a pretty easy decision for me. I decided I wanted to do a book about lake monsters, and I decided that as opposed to other cryptids, because I just kind of felt like they were a little bit underrepresented. You got a lot of books about Bigfoot and other cryptids, but lake monsters, I mean, there's some good books out there, but I hadn't really seen anything, fairly recently, when I wrote mine. My book came out in 2016, and I just felt they were a little underrepresented for as many reports and things as you hear about.
Well, why lake monsters? Why not ghosts or UFOs or, the word of the day, demons? What drew you specifically to sort of the lake monsters to kind of begin your career?
Well, I'll tell you what I really like about lake monsters, and I'm interested, in ghosts, in demons and UFO. I mean, I'm just interested really in anything weird and unexplained. But lake monsters to me it's how can I say? Lake monsters to me is the most plausible to be a flesh and blood actually exists kind of creature, if that makes any sense. Like Bigfoot, yeah, there's some evidence, and this, mostly inconclusive. But lake monsters, to me, could definitely exist with all of the water that we have, and then if you throw like your sea serpent reports in there in the oceans, there's just so much water and just so much habitat out there that these things could be in. It just seems like if there is a cryptid out there that's actually flesh and blood, actually exists, lake monsters, kind of fit the bill for that.
You said it seems more plausible than something like Bigfoot. But typically, a lake monster, it's going to be stuck in one lake. That seems like a really small environment for a monster or a lake monster to kind of live in, whereas Bigfoot, they can travel, they have forests, they have many areas where they can migrate to if that's the case. Why do you think that, or what drew you, or what makes you think that they're so plausible?
Well, if you look at a lot of the lakes that you get your reports from, I mean, they're vast. I mean, they're just really big. I mean, I can't remember exact measurements, but I think like let's take Lake Champlain for instance. I want to say, and anybody listening could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like almost 120 miles long. You know that, and it gets. I want to say it gets, some 400 feet deep. I think I've got the numbers in my book, but a lot of these lakes, kind of start running together in my head. But at any rate, I mean, they're very deep and just massive in their size. And not only that, a lot of these lakes, they have reports of underground tunnels and things like that connect other lakes. A lot of them have access even to the oceans and things. And so it just seems like that there's just so much water that these creatures could be hanging out in and could avoid detection pretty easily. And I just think that, with the habitat and all of the water that's out there, it just seemed more likely to me that would be something that could exist, more so. And I'm not throwing shade at land cryptids at all. I mean, I think that there's plenty of those out there that could be flesh and blood. It's just the lake monsters, sea serpents, that sort of thing, just really seem like it could be plausible to me.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Lake Champlain, and we have Nessie and Champ and some other bigger ones, or not bigger than those, but big ones. What's the typical, the average general description of a lake monster? Is it like a Nessie? Is it sort of that serpent-like, or are there any variations? What's the typical description?
Well, I mean, of course, there's variations, depending on witness sightings and reports of that sort of thing. But the typical, if I'm using air quotes here, the typical lake monster is kind of Nessie-like in appearance. It's 30 feet long. People report multi-humps, dark in color. And oftentimes, like a head or a neck sticking out of the water, 5-6 feet. And then there's other reports where you don't have the neck sticking out of the water so much, but it's the same kind of, serpentine appearance, dark in color. And those reports kind of like a snake-like head and that sort of thing. So there's some are more snake-like and some more will have a long neck sticking out of the water, but they're pretty consistent in the multi-humps, dark in color, 20, 30 feet long, that sort of thing.
See, I like a good monster, so I'd like to hear some differences in some of these stories. I'd love to hear one with like the monster or the alien head, come out of the water. But you're right. I mean, they do all have very similar traits. Do you think that indicates in any way that maybe they're somewhat related? I mean, like we talk about Bigfoot and we kind of, there's different tribes or groups of them, and we have this debate about, well, maybe they're all the same sort of species, maybe they're different. Do you think that all of these lake monsters are intertwined or related in some way, or do you think that maybe they've developed from other things separately?
I mean, I tend to think, and I mean, I can't really prove anything, but I tend to think that they're all pretty similar, probably the same type of creature. Like I said, but there are some variations. I mean, I've heard of of some that sound a little more aggressive or almost more like some kind of crocodile type creature, that sort of thing. But for the most part, I mean, they're pretty consistent.
Okay. I was listening to you and I lost my train of thought. I hate it when that happens. I remember what I wanted to ask. We know of sort of the major water monsters or lake monsters. Are there a lot of cases that maybe aren't getting national attention or worldwide attention? Is this more prevalent than we kind of give it credit for being?
Well, I think it is. I mean, throughout the U.S. and Canada, I mean, people would be shocked at just the number of lakes that have had some sort of monster sighting over the years. I mean, in my first book, I think I chronicled about 30 states and 6 provinces thereabout, and probably 50 creatures, and these all had a history of reports. And then there's a lot of lakes that have just had your kind of a couple of reports over the years. So the creature doesn't really have a name necessarily. I mean, up in the Finger Lakes of New York, I found old newspaper reports from the 1800s and things like that of encounters with creatures, but they don't they don't have the staying power like a champ or an Ogopogo or anything like that. But it really seems to be pretty widespread, and even into Russia and parts of Northern Europe and places like that. There's just a long history of these reports, so it just makes you think that there has to be something to it besides, logs or waves. Of course, that could probably account for a lot of the sightings, but I don't think it can explain all of them.
Well, with Russia, that with all of the nuclear accidents that they've had over the years, there could be anything in that water, like the old the Simpsons fish, the 3-headed fish.
I remember that. Yeah, that's true. I think didn't in one of those river monster or dark water, whatever that Jeremy Wade news show is. I think he went and was fishing outside of Chernobyl or something. I can't, but I think he was catching some pretty big and maybe some mutilated fish there. Who knows? Or mutated, not mutilated.
What's the one lake monster story from North America that maybe we don't know about, but we should?
Well, I mean, there's so many. One of my favorites is not really even a lake monster. It's more of a river monster.
Wait,
really.
I want to stop you for a second. If there are so many, why do you think that this isn't getting more attention, except for sort of the major, sightings or creatures?
Well, I think for the most, I mean, a lot of people just don't even come forward, with their stories, and a lot of them are just kind of relegated to old newspaper reports, things like that. I mean, Champ and Ogopogo and Tahoe Tessie, they're kind of recognized to a degree. They're Lake Erie, there's a supposed monster there, but I mean, for the most part, it's just not. I guess maybe it's just not as sexy as Bigfoot sightings. I mean, there's not a whole lot. When people get pictures, it seems like you could sit there and debate it back and forth. Oh, it's a log, it's a wave, this or that. It just doesn't. I guess maybe it doesn't have a lot of the close encounter. As close up and scary as a lot of your Bigfoot reports. I mean, sometimes I've heard of reports that are close up, but usually, people will get a picture, 50 yards away from their boat or 75 yards or something like that. But maybe that's got something to do with it. Who knows? It's hard to say.
What is your favorite story we've talked, essentially everything we've talked about up to now has been sort of that basic eel kind of monster. What's your favorite story of something that's different, or what's different out there?
I really like the stories of the White River Monster in Arkansas and Missouri. This creature, whatever it was described as being the size of a boxcar back in the day. There were a lot of reports in the 1930s. I think there were some early reports in the 1910s area, and there was another big rash of reports like in the 70s. And of course, there's sporadic things here and there, but those were your real big flaps, I guess would be the word, in the 30s and 70s. And this, whatever this thing was just described as, just being huge. It made weird sounds. It had like molted looking skin, and the reports of this thing go way back. I mean, even back to Native American times. There's reports of it flipping canoes. During the Civil War, there's reports of it sinking a Confederate gunship. And I don't know how true all of these things are, and you can't really verify them. But, the stories are embedded in the folklore of the area. And, supposedly in the 70s, these three-toed tracks were found on an island in the river, and vegetation had been trampled. And there's been a lot of theories about what the thing is. And a lot of researchers have pointed to maybe some kind of a wayward elephant seal, because of the size of this thing and the molted skin and gray color, and how an elephant seal would actually get to the White River in Arkansas. I don't know. That's above my pay grade, but it is what it sounds like. I mean, I don't know, how that could happen or this or that, but it really kind of fits the bill for this creature in a lot of ways.
Now, you also wrote a book on the water creatures and water monsters down in South America and Latin America. Are they significantly different? Are the reports sort of the same? What's the difference between maybe North American water monsters and South American water monsters?
Well, in South America, you really don't get your Nessie type of water monsters unless you're there's a couple lakes in the Andes, that you do, and also in the Patagonia region, there's actually a monster down in Argentina that's kind of nicknamed the Patagonian plesiosaur, and I can't really pronounce the names of the the lake that it's in, so you just have to bear with me. But mostly what you get in that area are your massive, supposedly your man-eating fish, your giant anaconda type creatures, water tigers, supposedly living dinosaurs in that neck of the woods, that sort of thing. You don't really have it's more like in your glacial lakes and your lakes high in the Andes that you get the your typical lake monsters.
You mentioned the plesiosaur. what is your take on the recent opinion that Nessie is not necessarily some form of ancient dinosaur that survived or something like that, but is in fact just a giant eel?
Well, the whole thing, I'll say this. So when these results came out, I mean, people that are into this kind of thing were anxiously awaiting these results, and I think it was mostly so people could prove their pet theories. And the plesiosaur is a pretty commonly held belief amongst lake monster enthusiasts. And this came out, and there was just a lot of victory laps. People were all over Twitter, all over Facebook, wherever else, Reddit. People were, I've always believed it was a giant eel. And, there's just so much, people dislocating their shoulders, patting themselves on the back and that sort of thing. But, the thing with the giant eel theory, I mean, that's been around like forever. I mean, I like Dr. Roy Mackal was, at least in the 80s, but maybe in the 70s, like he had proposed that. And the thing with the eDNA, I mean, there was, I want to say like 20% that was unidentified. So 20% is a lot. So that leaves a lot of wiggle room, I think, for for something unknown. It's just my view, and I don't mean to to sound anti-science or anything. I think it was really great that this study was done, and I think we can learn a lot about our lakes and things. But to me, the premise of it is a little bit flawed. I mean, if you're going to take samples of DNA, to try to prove or disprove an unknown creature is here, it just seems kind of flawed because, when you do come, if there is an unknown creature, well, you're not going to have,
you're not going to have control.
You're not exactly. You're not going to have anything to compare it to. So to me, and again, I mean, I know people have worked very hard on this. I'm glad that scientists are doing this. But I mean, as far as proving or disproving Nessie or using this same kind of testing to prove or disprove Bigfoot or this or that, I just don't see how it would work. And to me, the whole thing was really a big nothing burger as far as Nessie goes. I mean, do you know how they collected the samples? Was it just collecting water samples and testing what was in there? Yeah, they were collecting water. I mean, there's a lot of videos of them going, just like all over the lake and collecting water samples. And they take those water samples and do whatever kind of testing they do. But here's the thing, as far as the DNA goes, and I'm not a scientist, so but from what I've read on it, that the DNA in the water that they're collecting from is only good for about 3 weeks or so. So let's just say you had a Nessie sighting, right? And it's in a certain part of the lake. You would need to get to that part of the lake and collect a sample within 3 weeks to ensure that you're getting that DNA.
Well, couldn't they argue that if there were a lake monster in there, that its DNA should be floating around everywhere at any given time? And in theory, wouldn't you then be able to just go collect a water sample from anywhere randomly on the lake? Or let's be generous and say 10 samples from around the lake and find this DNA or potential unidentified DNA?
I mean, maybe I'm not smart enough to know all that. I just, like if I'm swimming in Loch Ness, and this is a pretty big place, if you're all the way on the opposite end, are you going to get any of my DNA? I don't know. I mean, would it be so diluted? I don't know. And this is, this technology is in its infancy. So I don't know how refined it is. And I guess what I'm saying, I don't mean to sound like I'm casting doubts on science and all that. I'm just saying that I'm not too sure that, that we really are able to dismiss as much as we're dismissing with all of this.
Now, forgive my ignorance, because Dave loves eels. He loves himself some eels, so he might be the one to ask this. But, okay, if it's a giant eel, isn't it still a lake monster? I mean, are giant eels a thing or prevalent? Or, I mean, they found the giant squid, and that's still kind of considered a monster. There were legends about that for years, or hundreds of years before they found it. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, if it is here's the thing. I mean, I know that I sounded kind of like I was dissing the science and all that, but I mean, I think it's awesome that scientists are coming out and saying perhaps it could be a giant eel. And as I said earlier, the giant eel theory has been around for a long time, and I don't want to put words in the scientists' mouths as far as like how big it could be. The European eels that are found in the loch, I think that they might get to 4 feet, maybe a little bit bigger. They're nothing like the conger eels out in the saltwater. But at any rate, if there were some kind of giant eel, and I remember listening to or reading one of the articles that Professor Gemmel had said perhaps some mutations had occurred that had that maybe the eels weren't leaving the lake to spawn or whatever, that they were just staying there and just growing to abnormal sizes. So, I mean, that's pretty fascinating itself. And, giant eels like that, I think that would still be a pretty big discovery. That would still be a monster. And it does fit the sightings in a lot of ways. I mean, it doesn't, to me, it does. There are a lot of sightings where there's a neck visible above the water. There's some land sightings, and the creature in those reports has a body and things like that. But still, the reports of the multi-hump, kind of moves with vertical undulations that you hear of lake monsters, that kind of fits with an eel. I've accidentally caught 4 or 5, not 5 foot, but probably close to 4-foot eels. Accidentally caught them fishing before, and when you hook into them, you see them out there breaking the water, and they look just like the lake monster reports. They move kind of, they look like a sine curve, moving in those vertical undulations. So if you had something that was 3 times that big, I mean, that would certainly be a monster in my view.
Now, when you catch these eels, do you fillet them? Do you fry them?
Oh, no, man. If I hook into an eel, man, I just cut my line. I don't want nothing to do with those nasty things.
I'm trying to get Dave to try some smoked eel with me. I'm hoping I can convince him, but I don't think I'm going to.
The only time I've ever caught them is on accident. I mean, I've watched that River Monster show, and like Jeremy Wade, I've seen him like fishing for these massive eels and things. But I've caught them a couple times on the Potomac River on accident, and I caught one that's like probably 3 feet long, and one that was probably closer to 4. Like at nighttime fishing, and it's kind of freaky. I don't like them.
What do you think that this idea that it's a giant eel does to the whole concept or idea of the living dinosaur? I mean, it seems like the water monster plays so tightly with that whole thing. Is this an effort to maybe, or is it sort of pushing the whole idea of living dinosaur type things, type creatures away, or is it just another report of something they kind of already knew?
Well, it was kind of like I was saying earlier. I mean, as far as the DNA testing goes, we already knew that there were eels in the loch, right? So that's nothing new. And they said that they didn't get any type of plesiosaur or whatever DNA. Well, again, like I said earlier, there was 20% that's unaccounted for. So if you're a believer in the plesiosaur theory, I don't think you really need to jump ship and abandon it now. But I do think that it might kind of tip the scales a little more in the direction of a giant eel, and a little less in the direction of the plesiosaur. It's just so preliminary and so early that I don't. If it were me, I just wouldn't really jump ship one way or the other.
Can you explain to me what the water tiger is? Is this some sort of lake monster, hybrid lake water monster? What exactly is it?
Well, in South America, like throughout the continent, there's these water tiger legends. In Argentina, they have one. They have one up in French Guinea, and I think in like Ecuador, all just kind of like scattered throughout the continent. But there's sometimes they're described a little differently. But there's these reports of these creatures with large fangs, like 12-inch fangs, cat-like, that kind of like hide out under riverbanks and attack people or livestock, and these reports they go way back. In Argentina, there's writings of Jesuit priests from the late 1700s, 1800s, talking about vaqueros moving cattle across the or maybe they call them gauchos in Argentina, whatever. Moving cattle across these rivers, and these the cows being disemboweled by these tiger-like creatures, and it's just
and they're coming from the water.
Yeah, and that's one of the weird things. You don't really think of a cat, hiding out under the water and attacking, but there are just a lot of these reports, and there's one from French Guinea, like in the 60s, of a boy that had went missing, and his body washed up, and when a medical examiner checked his body, he just had wounds that were like consistent with one of these large cats attacking him. So these things go way back, and it's hard to say really what's behind it.
Does this play into the chupacabra idea then at all?
I don't know. Like the chupacabras just seem a little different to me, and the whole chupacabra thing, I think, is kind of
well, they seem different, but
yeah.
When you talk about a water monster that's tiger-like that comes out of the water and attacks people, chupacabra, I could imagine, could look a bit like that. I almost wonder if it's some form of, if we're going to go down the road, could it be some form of mutant or co-developed species?
Who knows? It's hard to say. There's a lot of theories behind it. Some people think that it's just the giant otters that live down in South America. I don't know really how aggressive they are toward humans, so I don't know how, how well that would fit. But one of those certainly could, hurt you pretty bad if they wanted to. I don't know that they've ever really been known to disembowel cattle and things like that. Other people have pointed toward giant sloths that maybe haven't gone extinct like they thought, or smilodons, which were really big cats with like 12-inch fangs, and maybe that there's a remnant population of those still alive. And I don't know if they would really hide out underwater or under riverbanks and ambush prey like that. It's hard to say.
Now, in South America, what kind of evidence is coming out of there? We seem to have, pictures from all over North America and Europe and things like that. But is it more based on, are the reports or experiences more based on legend down there? Are there researchers down there? Are there photos coming out down there? Because I don't know that I've ever seen a photo of a South American lake monster.
Well, and you know what? That's a lot of the reason that I wrote that book was that part of the world, there's not been a whole lot written about it really, and there are there's some videos of it looks like your typical lake monster with like your undulating large black type of lake monster in South America in one of the lakes on YouTube. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Sebastian. Cabrolito is what they call the lake monster. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but anyway, I don't know, probably if you plug that into in your YouTube search, I think that video is still up. And then there's another one that's called Huechelito, if I'm saying it right, in one of the lakes down in Argentina. And the mayor of a town down there commissioned a study after pictures were captured of this creature. So there are those reports. Well, we just really don't hear about them, like some lake monster pictures in Argentina is not really something that's going to break the news, up here.
Why do you think that lake monsters kind of play second fiddle to everything else in the paranormal?
I guess it's just not it. Like I was saying earlier, I just don't think it's as sexy as Dogman or Bigfoot. Everybody's
But doesn't it open itself up to a little bit more of true scientific study?
Well, I think it would, and that's kind of like what's happening right now with the eDNA on the lock, and and I guess that maybe isn't as sexy, right, as as some of the the Bigfoot reports and things.
There's people out there that always talk about making an effort to capture Bigfoot. And I mean physically capture Bigfoot. Are there fishermen out there or teams out there that are trying to capture, maybe not Nessie, but some of these more unknown stories or events? Are they out there trying to actually find these legends or prove them?
I know of a couple people on Lake Champlain that are pretty dedicated to, finding evidence, not so much capturing the creature, but finding,
I mean some of these smaller, lesser known water monsters.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, most of the people that I've heard of have been, looking for Ogopogo or Champ. The other lesser known water creatures is, sometimes more of like a weekend visit kind of thing. It's not as dedicated as but with like Champ and Ogopogo, you've just got so many more reports there. I think Champ's got like over 600 documented reports. I don't know how many Ogopogo has, but I mean there's certainly a lot. And even like in in Montana, like the Flathead monster, I think there's close to 100 documented reports of that. So, some of these lakes where there's more documented reports, people tend to focus on a little more. And there are people out there trying to get real good evidence and things like that. But it's an expensive proposition, as you can imagine, trying to nail down a water monster as opposed to, Bigfoot evidence. Really all you need's, some game cams and things like that.
We've got about 7 minutes before we go to break. Can you tell me a story about maybe a giant anaconda? Because any size anaconda is giant to me.
Well, there are a lot of reports in South America of giant anacondas. And when I'm talking about giant anacondas, your listeners, they could refer back to the movie Anaconda, that, what was it, J-Lo and Ice Cube, or what, that dumb 90s movie where there's this, 100 foot or better, 5 feet, 5 yard and up, probably more like 5 yards in diameter. These anacondas are, and I guess they're probably not really anacondas, but they call them, a lot of people call them giant anacondas. Down in that neck of the woods, there's a lot of different names for them. One of the most common you'll hear is the Yakumama. And in, the isolated places in Peru along the Amazon and over into Bolivia and Brazil, there's these reports of these giant, just these giant snakes, like I said, over 100 feet long. And apparently they burrow into the ground, they hibernate, and when they wake up, they head toward rivers, and it causes almost like seismic activity. It uproots trees and tears these trenches as it goes into the water. And
do they wake up every 30 years and eat a town on their way?
I don't know how often they wake up. That's the thing, and I'm not sure that they really eat a town. But there was a report that I found from the night, I want to say it was like 97, and I found it in the Drudge Report archives. Drudge is just one of those, like where they consolidate, different news reports or whatever. But anyway, it said, I'm trying to remember the exact headline, but it was something along the lines of giant snake, 2 school bus lengths long. And it had the, the testimony of a fisherman that was out in the water, and he saw this thing come into the water and nearly like capsized his canoe and things like that, or not his canoe, but his boat. And there were just like several of those incidents in Peru. There was like one in 97. I think there was another one like in 2011. I might be getting the dates wrong, but there were some reports down that way of a lady's house. She had one of those houses kind of like in a swampy area. It was one of those houses like up on stilts, and one of these giant boas or giant anacondas destroyed her house. That she described up leading to this event, that she had been smelling the real strong boa urine, and this thing pushed like a debris pile or into her house and destroyed it. And it actually was in the some of the newspapers down there.
Is there any kind of physical or photographic evidence of this creature?
The creature, I wouldn't say. I don't know that there's any real good evidence as far as pictures of the creature. There's obviously like the trenches and things that they cut. But if any of your listeners wanted to look into it a little more, I would say go to bigsnakes.info. And a guy from Northern Ireland, Mike Warner, did a couple expeditions down in that part of the world, and he's got some pictures of what he believes might be the one of those snakes. I mean, I don't think it's that convincing myself, but it's food for thought.
It seems like something a little bit hard to swallow.
Oh, I agree, but I've been down in the Amazon one time, and when you're down there, you're on a boat for like 4 hours to get to a little to get to one of these little villages that you stay at, and you go for hours and hours, and you don't see a building, you don't see a person, you don't see anything. And just the vastness. I'm convinced that there could be absolutely anything there.
Well, you could be right. I'm going to get you to hold that thought for a second. We're going to step out for a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk to you about your trip to Atlantic City. That sounds like it was a lot of fun, and I want to hear about that. So we will be right back on Spaced Out Radio.
Move over, brother, and let me own Saturday night.
This is Rich Giordano, and I'm inviting you to tune on in to Spaced Out Saturdays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, where I'm going to bust open the lids on everything paranormal. Why? Because we want answers, and I'm the guy who's going to deliver those answers to you. Join the chat rooms, and we'll see you this Saturday. Just be there. No, really.
Are you addicted to the woo? Good. Me too. This is Dave Scott, and you can woo it up with me every Monday through Friday, starting at 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, for 3 hours of great entertainment in the subjects you love. UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, intuition. Yes, we hit it all 5 days a week. Look for us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, my friends, we own the night.
Hi, this is Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where we store all of the SOR show archives for free. And as an added bonus, every 2 weeks I'm posting brand new content on Cryptid Tales, where I will get into some of the spookier legends and folklore from around the world and tell the stories that go with them. Find us at youtube.com/spacedoutradio and check out Cryptid Tales today. Drop a comment and let me know what you want to hear. See you there.
We all know on Spaced Out Radio we love a good beard and mustache, so why not take care of your facial hair with Mighty Moose Beard Oil? Made in Canada, we're taking care of beards and stashes around the world. We use 100% natural ingredients with our oils and balms to make your whiskers feel silky smooth. Use promo code SOR2019 at MightyMooseBeard.com today.
Canada's largest UFO conference is ready to roll in Toronto this September 21st and 22nd at the Alien Cosmic Expo. This year is about the experience. Listen to the stories of Dave Scott, Travis Walton, Paula Harris, Grant Cameron, Ryan Stacey, Richard Dolan, Leslie Mitchell-Clark, and more. Get your tickets now at aliencosmicexpo.com.
Are you having encounters with the paranormal, supernatural, or ufological that you cannot explain? Look no further than the SOR Sightlines Report, brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association. This is Ryan Stacey, head of the Research Association, TESSA. Soon on the Spaced Out Radio website, you'll be able to file your reports and have them researched for you. We are independent and ready to help Spaced Out Radio listeners today.
Coming soon to our website, spacedoutradio.com, is the SOR Space Travelers Club. For just $5 a month, you can get into a private area on our site where you can hang with other listeners in our chat room, post in our forum, and check out a bunch of exclusive content and store that won't be found anywhere else, including a nightly after-show party with Dave. It's going to be the best $5 a month you're going to spend. The SOR Space Travelers, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
If you're heading to Vancouver, make sure you stop by the official bar of Spaced Out Radio, the Moose Vancouver. It's the place to party in YVR. At the corner of Nelson and Granville, the Moose Vancouver is always up to speed with a kitchen staff that serves great food. All food on the menu, $6.95 to $8.95. There's a reason the Moose Vancouver is recognized as one of the hottest spots on the West Coast. Get your horns up for the Moose Vancouver.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Every night on Spaced Out Radio, we have places for you to hang out. Hi, this is Carl. Join our SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook for live chat. On Twitter, using hashtag Spaced Out Radio, you can also join us in our Spreaker chat room. Check us out on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR. All of our archives are free on YouTube at Spaced Out Radio. By the way, I'll be watching you at your window until you do. Bye!
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, and I have to tell you, I love the response I get for Little Brother is Watching from Spaced Out Radio fans. It's amazing how music can inspire and make people think deeper about what's going on in the supernatural world. You can head over to my website, bumblefoot.com, to check out my music, my guitar workshops, my touring, even check out some of the hot sauces that I'm working on. And make sure you keep on listening, because with Spaced Out Radio, you know Little Brother is watching.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Looking for the stories of the strange and weird that you will find hard to find anywhere else? Check out the SOR Newswire on our website. Our writers, led by Captain Shirk, are scouring the world for the oddest and most bizarre stories we can find. Everything from weird crime to suspenseful and paranormal. We're working hard for you to bring you the most intriguing news of your day. Check out the SOR Newswire at spacedoutradio.com today.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sundays. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer, and I thank you for being with us. Here comes the really hard part. I haven't had a chance to memorize any of this yet, so I'm going to read this cold, or semi-cold. We welcome back everybody listening on our terrestrial affiliates, KDNF AM 1560 in Dangerfield, Texas, KDUN AM 1030 in Reedsport, Oregon, KZFX 93.7 FM in Ridgecrest, California, and WQEE 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia. Oh, and don't forget UPRN 107.7 FM in New Orleans. On the digital side, we are on Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio. And don't forget, you can check out our archives at youtube.com/spacedoutradio.com or Spaced Out Radio. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping at the Spaced Out Radio store, which is going to be fantastic, and read up on the SOR Newswire, where you can find Dave's blog. And I mentioned it earlier, he just posted one that's really important for everybody to read. So, with that, Denver, thanks for joining us. Denver, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, that's better. Okay. What possessed you or what inspired you to write? Basically, it's going to be, the beginning of a series on road trips? But you wrote a book journaling your trip from your home in Virginia all the way to Atlantic City, sort of Las Vegas light.
Yeah, I one of my big things is my wife and I, we travel a lot, all over the country, and anytime I travel, I try to find I do a lot of research beforehand, try to find the local legends, paranormal things. For instance, like if we go to Atlantic City or something, right? She might be interested in some kind of foodie event there. One of the big casino hotels there, every year they have some celebrity chefs from Food Network, right? And so she'll go. We'll go up there and she'll get to do all that. But I'll stop along the way and check out some places that might be known for hauntings or cryptids or this or that. And so the basis of the whole series is picking out those little places that are off the beaten path, the local history, the local legends of just various places all over the country.
So tell me about the trip. What did you find?
Well, along the way to Atlantic City, Atlantic City itself is on some very haunted ground. It's on, I guess you would call it Absecon Island, and there's an inlet there, Absecon Inlet, and it used to be called Graveyard Inlet just because of the number of shipwrecks. Apparently, back in the old days, up into probably the mid 1800s or whatever, before they put a lighthouse there, it was just really treacherous waters. I know when I was writing the book, I looked up the number of accidents, but it was like hundreds of ships were crashing into the. I guess the shoreline was real treacherous there, and so they built a lighthouse there eventually just because of the number of accidents that were happening, and the one that led up to the lighthouse being built, I think estimates vary, but anywhere from 200 to like 311 German immigrants were killed in an accident, and supposedly it was just horrific. There were just bodies, all up and down the island there, and so there's just a lot of real haunted type places, like the lighthouse. I've not been to it. I've been to it a couple times. I've not been to it at night, and I don't even know if you're allowed to go there at night. But there's supposedly a lot of weird things that happen at the lighthouse on the end of town. I think Dr. Pitney, who was instrumental in getting the lighthouse built, He had a house nearby that's supposedly haunted, and there's a lot of weird things around Atlantic City, and of course, you got the infamous Pine Barrens with the Jersey Devil, and there's a lot of Bigfoot reports there, and from my house getting there, you travel through a lot of areas that there's the snarly owl, the dueyo, just all kinds of just weird creatures and weird things.
The snarly what?
Yeah, in the panhandle of West Virginia and into Maryland, Washington County, Frederick County, Maryland, there's a phantom dog called the snarly owl. And anyway, this is it's like a big black dog, but I mean, it's huge. It's, it's like the biggest dog you could think of, and it's black, and it's got a red mouth, and in the West Virginia Panhandle and over into Maryland, it's really more of a Maryland, South Mountain of Maryland kind of legend, but there's been sightings into Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and even all the way down to like Hillsborough, Virginia. But travelers, in the 1800s, early 1900s, would report, just seeing this massive dog when people would throw stones at it or shoot guns at it, and the bullets or projectiles would pass right through it. And there's reports of people seeing it in a field and it, like passing through fence posts. There was kind of a rash of sightings like in the 70s, and I think I even saw one that was in the Washington Post where a Frederick, Maryland couple was driving along. I don't remember if it was Route 40 or Route 15, but anyway, it was in that central Maryland area. And they were driving along, and all of a sudden this just massive black dog was in the road, and they, hit it, and, they looked behind their car, and it was there, just unharmed. And there's just like all of these reports, and a lot of people think the legend comes from Welsh immigrants. But wherever it comes from, there have been a lot of reports of this phantom dog.
Did you mentioned the Pine Barrens? Did you get to investigate or explore in there at all?
Yeah, I've been there, several times. I've done some hiking in there. I've never seen the Jersey Devil or even saw like any or heard or found any signs of Bigfoot activity in there, but a lot of people have. There's a lot of Bigfoot reports that come from that part of the world, in addition to Jersey Devil reports.
What on this trip that you took, what was the strangest thing that you kind of heard about or learned about or maybe even experienced?
Well, along the way, you go through, before you get to the bridge crossing the Delaware, you could go north just a little bit. Only like 10 minutes, if that. It's not out of the way at all, really, into Wilmington, Delaware. And there's a lot of old historic homes that are haunted there. There's Rockwood Manor, and that place is just well known for haunts. And then there's Bellevue, and that place was real interesting to me because Bellevue is a historic home, and it's modeled after James Madison's Montpelier down in Orange, Virginia, which I had been to several times, and it does. Going there, it looks just like it, and there's supposedly a lot of haunted activity there, and there's those haunted those historic haunted places I thought were kind of cool. I mean, I did not experience anything myself when I visited these places, but I just love those old stories, like for instance the at Rockwood, there's before you get to the main house, outside of it, there's these it's like these stone ruins. It looks like a foundation, just like a partial stone wall up. And anyway, that was this kid Eddie that lived there, and they call it Eddie's Playhouse. And there's supposedly been a lot of activity reported at his playhouse, and inside the main house, people have reported like a child's laughter and that sort of thing. So, there's that kind of creepy, legendary stuff, although I didn't experience it myself.
There are a lot of legends that come out of the Pine Barrens, and I just want to jump back to them for a second, because I want to know if you've ever heard of something in the Pine Barrens called Seven Gates Road.
I'm not familiar with that, to be honest with you.
Okay. It's a strange story, and I'm not going to get into it right now because, well, I've tried to look up Seven Gates Road, and when you type that in, you get Zillow, and you get all kinds of real estate listings.
Oh,
but,
no.
Somebody told me about this, and I'm trying to find out something more about it. All I know is that it took place in or exists within the Pine Barrens somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories from that part of the world. I mean, and the Pine Barrens, I mean, it's a vast area. I mean, I think that the Pine Barrens themselves, I mean, I think it's like over 1 million acres. I mean, people think of New Jersey, or at least me personally, coming from Virginia down here in the South, you think of New Jersey and, you're thinking of like chemical plants.
Yeah.
Just like crowded streets. But I mean, southern New Jersey is very rural, and there's just vast stretches. I think there's like, I might have my numbers off here, but I think the Pine Barrens, there's like over, 400,000 acres of it that's actually protected land. And I think there's probably like close to 1 million acres of just wooded land that's considered the Pine Barrens. So there's just a vast area. And like I was saying earlier, there's, of course, your Jersey Devil reports that, go way back. You've got a lot of Bigfoot sightings in that part of the world. There's even, supposedly cougar sightings, that sort of thing.
You and I talked previously about there was some, not dog man kind of thing, but there was some sort of creature out there that used to, or still does, like jump at cars right out. It comes right out of the woods, right to the side of the road, and jumps at cars. I can't remember what it was called, unfortunately, but you and I talked about it a couple of months back.
Yeah,
There's so many legends that come out of there.
There are just so many legends, and I mean, there's those like Jersey Devil reports. There's a report, like in the early 1900s, of it like jumping on top of a taxi, and this is like a pretty widely reported event. Some people chalk it up as a Bigfoot sighting, and some people call it a Jersey Devil. So it's hard to say. The tales all kind of run together. It's if you think the Jersey Devil is actually a Bigfoot, you'll chalk that up as a Bigfoot sighting, kind of thing. But there's a lot of weird reports for sure.
Now, what about Atlantic City? What was your favorite legend there, or tell me a couple of the ghost stories or haunting stories there besides the lighthouse, because we hear about Vegas and the the joy and tragedies that occur there and how they kind of leave their mark on the town. But we don't really hear much about Atlantic City.
Well, one of my favorites, and you know, I put this story in one of my books, and I've also wrote a little piece about it on my website. You know, I do like a weekly blog post for my website. But so the I guess now it's the I guess it's a Hard Rock hotel. I know it's owned by Hard Rock. I don't know what it's actually called now because I've not been up there like in a year or so since the place has been open, whatever. But anyway, it's the old the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. And there's a tale from there where supposedly, and I've not been able to independently verify this, it could just be a story, so let me throw that out there. But anyway, apparently someone jumped off of the parking garage on top of the hotel and killed themselves. And this is one of those stories, like apparently at midnight around a certain part of the casino or hotel, you know, you could feel a presence and this or that. And I'd put in my book, you know, that I'd been over to the Taj Mahal, and I never experienced anything really strange like that myself. But yeah, it's just like, who knows? And after I had published that, on my website, you know, a lady contacted me and was telling me all about her experiences, and you know, back when it was the Trump Taj Mahal, and she had talked about it in her hotel room, and I off the top of my head I can't remember what floor it was on or you know what room number it was on, but she was talking about just like all kinds of weird experiences and things like that she had had, and she, you know, she was just like, wow, you know, I'm so glad that you would, you know, that you'd put that in your, you know, in your blog post. And, so, and you know, you can imagine like in these casinos that there's just gotta be a lot of these tragic kind of tales, right? I mean, people, you can't go 25 yards without a sign that says, if you need help for gambling, call this number. And, you know, and there's like pawn shops everywhere. And you can only imagine the people that have just lost their livelihoods in these places. And it's hard to tell how many suicides and things like that have happened. And, of course, there's, you know, some of these places are kind of seedy, and there's been a lot of violent crime and that sort of thing.
Are there any sort of crossover reports in Atlantic City of whether it be the Jersey Devil, or I was thinking the Mothman kind of figure that seems to be popular right now? Any sightings of something like that around the casinos or in the area?
I mean, there could be. I've not heard of anything myself. I mean, mostly what I've heard of it around the Atlantic City area, maybe a little bit south of there, a little bit north of there, have been, you know, sea serpent sightings. Of course, your Jersey Devil sightings not far from there. And then mostly all the other things I've heard of have just been like your ghost-like tales. I've not heard any kind of winged humanoid type reports or things like that. But I mean, that doesn't mean that, you know, that they've not happened and they're not out there. I'm not plugged into the local goings-ons, you know, as I just kind of log what I experienced and the things that I've researched, you know, before and after going to a place.
Okay. You left Atlantic City and you came back home. And you live in Virginia or West Virginia?
I live in Virginia.
But you grew up or spent a lot of time in West Virginia because you wrote a book about West Virginia.
Yeah, all my life I've lived the furthest away I've lived from West Virginia is like an hour. Like right now I'm only 20 minutes from the line. So I've always been kind of interested in the, the goings-ons over to the west.
We all kind of have the stereotypical view of West Virginia, and there's a couple of different, views of the typical person from West Virginia. But what's going on in West Virginia?
Well, it's just one of these places that it's hard to describe, but there's just so many weird things that happen over there. There's just a ton of cryptid reports from over there. There's these ghost reports from over there. There's, of course, everybody knows about the Mothman and the Flatwoods Monster. There's even weirder creatures like the sheep squatch from that you hear about in West Virginia. It's just, man, there's just so many strange things.
Let's circle right back around and tackle that one.
The sheep squatch?
The sheep squatch?
Well, it's exactly like it sounds. It's there's just these reports of this creature. Sometimes it's spotted on bipedal, and sometimes on four legs. But it's like a large sheep-like creature, and has like horns and lightly colored. And there's reports of it, like I said, on two legs, and has like bellowed and screamed at people like out ginseng hunting, and it's just one of these weird things. I've read reports of it spotted around the for those folks out there that have any familiarity with the Mothman reports, out around the TNT area, like where Mothman was spotted, in the late 60s. That this thing has been seen, in the 90s and afterward. But a lot of times reports of the creature, accompanies like a sulfur smell. And it's just one of those weird things, and you don't know if it's something supernatural or if it's an actual flesh and blood creature. It's hard to tell.
Well, just calling it sheep squatch opens itself up to all kinds of, let's call them interpretations.
Yeah, well, it's one of those kinds that like in my little dictionary of strange creatures, I call it an in-between, because I don't know. Some things, sometimes you hear reports of it, like I was saying earlier, some ginseng hunters reported an encounter. I don't remember what county it was in, if it was like in Boone County maybe. I can't remember the county for sure, but anyway, it was lightly colored. It was on two legs, but it had horns. And I think they said it stood like at 8 feet tall. So in a lot of ways, you could say, okay, maybe that's, and you're taking a leap here, right? Assuming that that Sasquatch exists as a flesh and blood creature, or Sasquatch exists at all. But you could say maybe it's just a lightly colored Sasquatch, and that's what a lot of people think. But then when you hear of it, on four legs, down drinking water from a stream, a sulfur smell around it, I don't know. That almost sounds something that's more ghost-like or whatever. So that's kind of why, in my own little categories, I called it an in-between.
You mentioned ghost-like. What is and I'm not entirely familiar with this, but what is the white phantom dog?
Well, there's places in West Virginia, that there's these reports of phantom white dogs, and we talked about the snarly owl earlier, and it's kind of like that in a lot of cases. They're just these massive white dogs, like the size of wolves almost, but they're white, and it's kind of the same deal. Like, bullets will pass through them, and there's a report where I think it was in Marion County, but at any rate, where a hunter was attacked by one of these things, and his buddies, I guess they were off in different areas or different tree stands. They heard him screaming. They come running over, and he's laying on the ground, kicking and screaming, and he's crying, and he's like, it's pulled out my guts, and they're like, what, dude? He's literally just laying on the ground, flailing around, and they don't see anything. And he would not go back into the woods after that. Supposedly one of these white dogs jumped on him, and they went tumbling down a hill, and it pulled his guts out. It's just these weird tales like that. And there's a report, and again, so many of these tales start running together, and the locations, when I'm on the spot, like on a radio show, I get confused of what county it was in and this and that. So please forgive me, folks listening. But I think it was in around that same area, around the kind of within a hour radius, this or that, of Morgantown. For anybody interested in exactly where this took place, but there's a report of an attack where a guy, I think this was back in the 1930s, he's walking home from work, and he's attacked by one of these phantom white dogs, and they go rolling into the cemetery, and I guess once they rolled into the cemetery, the phantom white dog left or disappeared or this or that, and he was able to get on his way. But when the attacks happen, it sounds physical, and the reports that that they could feel their the dog's hot breath, and like the hunter, he could feel his abdomen being bit and ripped at, and that sort of thing. So it's just really weird. And I've not heard too, I'm not saying that it's never happened, but I've not heard, a report like that around where I live here in Virginia. But there seems to be in that part of West Virginia quite a few of those.
It seems a bit like there's a lot of weird things in West Virginia. Just looking at some of the events that have been reported there. And one of the things that fascinates me probably the most in native history and native legends and things like that is the Thunderbird, because you hear these Native American legends about it. You have sightings of different types of Thunderbirds really across the country. But West Virginia has a bit of a history with them too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And there's just a lot of reports of just these Thunderbird sightings, and there are two different types really. One type sounds almost like a pterosaur, and the other type sounds like a teratorn, one type sounds like the winged dinosaur type, and the other is like a large dark colored feathered bird. And but both, they've got 20-foot wingspans, and it's just really weird. I mean, and you get them kind of all over the state. I mean, there's several from up along the Pennsylvania line, up around the northern panhandle of, people seeing these things, these birds that they report of with 20-foot wingspans, where they say, at first I thought it was an airplane, but then when I looked at it, it's like, oh my goodness, that's that's a bird. And I can think of one report that I put in my book where like the people pulled their car over and got out and looked at it. And I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head, so it might have been in the early 2000s, kind of before everybody had a cell phone that had a video camera on it like they do now. But there's another one I can think of, back to the pterosaur reports, not far from Charleston, but where like one of these things was like in the middle of the road, and it spread its wings out. This was like a 2-lane country road, and the wings, went from one side of the road to the other, just huge. And, like when they pulled up to it, it flew off. But it's just really weird that you have all these, for lack of a better word, Thunderbird reports. And like you said, I mean, they're nationwide. You probably have more of them up in Pennsylvania than you even do in West Virginia. And, like Illinois, it's a real hot spot for those things. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is Illinois a hot spot for them? Now, are you kind of pulling in the whole Mothman phenomena into the Thunderbird? Because that was going to be my next question. That are these interchangeable? Are people mistaking one for the other?
I don't really think so. It seems like there have been a lot of those Thunderbird reports in Illinois, and folks that like myself that were fans of the old History Channel Monster Quest show probably remember an episode of where they had the Thunderbirds. I think in that show they went up to Wisconsin, but anyway, it seems like along the kind of like following the Mississippi, there seems to be several almost like north-south flight paths. And there was a researcher, Mark Hall. I think he died in 2016, but he identified like 3 what he thought were flight paths, and that would indicate that these birds were migratory, that they followed, down through North America, and a piece of West Virginia, got caught up in one of those flight paths, and who knows? It's kind of interesting to think about if this is a thing.
Do you watch, and I'm a fan of the show, Mountain Monsters, kind of based there in West Virginia?
I've watched a few episodes, and I don't mean to like throw shade or anything, but
we don't need to do that. But what I wanted to do is, they mentioned several different cryptids that they're supposed to go out after, and I was wondering if you knew anything about this death dog.
Yeah, I don't know of it, but the death dog. But I mean, it almost sounds kind of like the snarly owl or some of those white phantom dogs. So I don't know of that one specifically, and I don't know if maybe a lot of the different legends have been kind of intermingled or something.
Yeah, that could be. Maybe they'll go after the West Virginia vegetable man.
I would definitely tune in for that one.
Well, that's a really interesting case, not only because it only happened once, but also because it only happened once. What's your take of it? Because it was in July of 1968 that Jennings Frederick, what I believe his name was.
I think his name was Frederick Jennings.
Okay, well, I'll give you that because I could confuse it, but I thought I saw it. But he sees this creature that sort of resembles a stalk of celery.
Yeah, this is a really weird tale. And as best as if any of your listeners out there want to get the real word for word tale, pick up a copy or a Kindle version of Gray Barker's book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. It's in there. This tale is really weird. There's a guy, he's an Air Force, not only is he an Air Force vet, but I think that when this happened, he was still enlisted in the Air Force. So what happened, this guy it's in the late 60s, like Everett said, and he's out in the woods, he's bow hunting, and yeah, he just hears this weird message like help me or something like that. And next thing he knows, he pulls a handkerchief out of his pocket and it's just like tangled up in thorns. And then all of a sudden, like a green hand with suction cups on the tips of the fingers is around, like his forearm. And it squeezes him so hard that like a blood vessel pops. And so what he describes is almost like a blood transfusion taking place between him and this. He calls it like a stalk-like creature, and it has yellow eyes. So I don't know. I mean, if any of you guys listening have heard or have ever, for your kids, maybe I don't know if this is still a thing or not, but when my kids were little, Veggie Tales, I think of that guy that looked like a stalk of celery, right? It was like a stalk-like appearance, but it was humanoid. And it had yellow eyes, and it's said to him telepathically, you need not fear us, we need your help. And it's like it took a blood transfusion from his arm, and then he said it took off in 25-foot strides, and that was it.
If it was taking 25-foot strides, how tall did he describe it as?
Hey, from what I saw, if I'm remembering right, and what I read in, Gray Barker's book, I don't remember a size being described, because I kind of thought the same thing as you. If that's taken off in 25-foot strides, it would need to be pretty darn tall. That's a pretty big stride. So I don't know if that's I really don't know how big that thing would be, and as best as I remember, it's not really described in the book.
And didn't it take off and go over a hill where he then said he heard some form of hum or growling noise and kind of said or made the conclusion that it took off in a UFO or something like that?
Yeah, that's kind of like what I remember from it. It's kind of insinuated, that this might have been an extraterrestrial type being that, took off in some sort of craft. And also the same guy, his mother had on her property had some UFO encounters and that sort of thing. So it's at least insinuated that there was some sort of extraterrestrial presence involved.
What do you think of the idea? Because I go back and forth with this a little bit. He never really tried to profit off the story. He never even really retold the story much. So on one hand, we look at it and it sounds like an incredibly it sounds like a stretch of a story, but on the other hand, there's some things that have happened or that he did with the story or didn't do with the story that kind of lead you back to the idea that, well, maybe he wasn't making it up.
Well, you make a good point. I mean, the story might be out there in other places, but I don't really know about it. It's like the Gray Barker books, really the only place that I've seen it, and I don't know that he tried to profit off of it in any way. And for whatever it's worth, I mean, Gray Barker, obviously, he doesn't have the best reputation as far as ufology goes. I mean, he was involved in some hoaxes and things, but for however good Gray Barker's word was, I mean, he did go to bat for the guy. He's kind of like, look, this guy's he's an Air Force vet. He served his country. Every indication I get from this guy, he's being honest, he's being truthful, he's educated, he's a good witness. And so and you're right. I mean, I don't it's not like you saw any kind of ploy to get any money or profit off the stories in any way.
What's your opinion of it? Do you think it was real? Do you think it happened? Maybe that's the one real alien encounter that's been out there.
Well, it's one of those things. I don't. I guess I think that he thinks it happened like that. If that makes any sense,
well,
and whatever.
It's a little hard to misinterpret anything as a big giant stalk of celery.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, something happened to him. I don't know what. Maybe what he experienced was something, like if you and I were standing there, we would see absolutely nothing. Maybe whatever this phenomenon is, maybe it was something more kind of telepathic or in his mind, that he was experiencing exactly as, he recounted. But if you and I were standing there, we'd be like, dude, snap out of it. What's the matter with you? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's going to go down as one of those cases that never gets fully explained.
No, I mean, you're not going to get any answers for it, and that's true of so many of the tales. I mean, you think of oh God, what's the guy's name? Woodrow Derenberger in West Virginia. His tales of alien visitation and that sort of thing with Indrid Cold. It's just so weird, and it's just. Why would he make all this up? Because he didn't really profit off of it. I mean, the guy, I think he ended up losing his marriage over it. I think moved out of the area and this and that, and he really didn't profit off of it in any way. But something, it seems like, happened to the guy. It's just hard to explain.
I'm not entirely familiar with him, but it does seem like coming out of West Virginia, there are maybe a higher ratio of these sort of one-off cases of just weirder things than the rest of the world or the rest of the country.
Well, it seems like that, and just, for anyone not familiar with Woodrow Derenberger, he supposedly off of I-64, and this was back in the late 60s, around the Mothman time. He saw a UFO, like hovering above his car, stopped like right in front of him, and he had to stop his car, and a character got out of this spaceship, and said he was Indrid Cold, and he was from a planet that was a little bit different than ours, and not as powerful and all of this, and supposedly Indrid Cold and some of his buddies would visit Woodrow Derenberger at his house, and the thing with that is, like, neighbors would report weird lights over his house, and Gray Barker and John Keel, both kind of like investigated the whole thing. It's just like one of those really weird things, and it's like, do I believe, what happened exactly as he said? No. But do I believe that something happened? Yeah, I believe something happened.
What about giants in West Virginia? There's a lot of talk about the idea of a giant human species that's roamed the earth. There have been places where bits and pieces of potential evidence have been found. Even around here, there's a place where they reportedly found a giant. But West Virginia kind of has a little bit of sort of a hotbed of giant remnants there, giant remains.
Well, West Virginia and over into Ohio is probably maybe like the some of the best in the country as far as these reports go. And this was something that's always interested me in West Virginia, especially around the Charleston area, the Kanawha Valley. There's been just these reports of 7-8 foot giant remains being recovered out of a lot of these mounds. I think West Virginia, there's at least 400 mounds that we know about, and even more, on the other side of the river in Ohio. And, this has always fascinated me. And there's, a lot of the Smithsonian reports of, I think the 12th annual report of to the Bureau of Ethnology had chronicled some of the findings down in the Charleston area. And there's others too, but it's just really widespread throughout that area, and it's it really fascinates me as to what might have been going on there in ancient times.
Now, are they finding bones or remains, or what are they finding to say that there could have been giants?
Well, in the Creel Mound, which is in the town of South Charleston, and I've been to this mound, and a lot of your listeners might even remember an Ancient Aliens episode where they're talking about some of the mounds and giants, and it's right in the middle of town. There's like if I'm standing on the mound, to my left is like a laundromat, and to my right on the other side of the road is an Advance Auto Parts. It is right in the middle of town, I'm telling you. But it's huge. It's like the second biggest mound in West Virginia, and according to the Bureau of Ethnology reports, there was like a 7-foot skeleton found in the mound, and it was so it was buried, and in a radial pattern, there were all these other skeletons around it, and in the corners of the rooms there were more skeletons yet. And a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of this stuff kind of gets confused with me, but I believe they might have been like in a sitting position. But you find that in a lot of ancient burials all over the world where royalty was buried, and like their servants or whatever were also unfortunately buried with them. So it seems like that might have been the case there. But up in the Grave Creek Mound up in the northern part of West Virginia, just south of Wheeling, when that mound was open, there was there was in the newspaper reports, they called it like a giant queen, and she was like 7 feet tall, and there were, like beads and just like all kinds of, like interesting artifacts found along with it, and not far, going back to the Charleston Mound that we were just talking about, just a little bit, I want to say it's west of there, but I might have my directions messed up. But anyway, there's like a couple of 7-foot skeletons found near there. So there's just been a lot of these, and they're in a lot of the Bureau of Ethnology reports, and we don't really know what happened to those. The bones that that the people found back then.
But how do we consider a 7-foot person a giant? I mean, every couple of weeks on some of the social media, I see a picture of a giant skeleton being unburied with it. It appears to be that the head is the size of a cooler. So how can, and I know it's fake and I know it's photoshopped and it's just one of those things that goes around, but do we really consider a 7-foot tall person a giant?
Well, if you have, like a 7-foot person, like Shaquille O'Neal, 7'1", I think he is. Okay, if you don't want to consider him a giant, I mean, cool, but the number of those skeletons that we found, so if we're talking just the several ones that we found in West Virginia, I mean, that's a pretty big percentage, right, compared to, what you would expect to find. And plus, it seems to me like people were a lot shorter back then. Go look at old Civil War uniforms, that you see in a museum and stuff. I mean, like today, we're quite a bit taller than people were back in Civil War times and things like that. So,
I think I'll give you that. We're just about up to break. So when we get back, we're going to talk about your trip to Roswell and Las Cruces, and we'll touch back on these giants a little bit and finish that up. So we will be right back on Spaced Out Radio.
We're adding to the entertainment online for Spaced Out Radio. I'm Amber Beckrud, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out Cryptid Tales, where I will take you on a journey into some of the strangest legends and lore from around the world, relaying the stories to you of the strange creatures and experiences that people have had throughout time. You can find Cryptid Tales at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. And while you're there, don't forget to check out our free archives and leave a comment. See you there.
Are you having encounters with the paranormal, supernatural, or ufological that you cannot explain? Look no further than the SOR Sightlines Report, brought to you by the Experiencers Support Association. This is Ryan Stacy, head of the Research Association, TESA. Soon on the Spaced Out Radio website, you'll be able to file your reports and have them researched for you. We are independent and ready to help Spaced Out Radio listeners today.
Come hang out with me, Little Richie G, as I take over the airwaves on Spaced Out Saturdays. This is Rich Giordano, and I'm going to bring you the most fun on the radio you can have with your clothes on. We're going to get to the heart of the subjects from UFOs to what's going on in the paranormal and everything in between. So come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, for the fastest 3 hours of your week.
Come get spooked at the 4th Annual Forest Moon Paracon in Cedar-Woolley, Washington, Saturday, September 28th. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot. Speakers include Mike Morin and Jason Jordan, R. Keith Andrews, and Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and so much more. There will be workshops and a VIP roundtable. Get early bird tickets now at fmparacon.com.
Coming up this September 21st and 22nd, all UFO eyes will be focused on Toronto for the 4th Annual Alien Cosmic Expo. Come listen to some of the biggest names and experiencers in ufology: Travis Walton, Paul Hellyer, Richard Dolan, Paula Harris, Grant Cameron, Randy Kramer, and Spaced Out Radio's own Dave Scott. Tickets are on sale now at aliencosmicexpo.com.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for a night on the town? The Moose Vancouver is the bar that never stops rocking until 2 a.m. every night. The Moose has great food with everything on the menu from $6.95 to $8.95. Fantastic, vibrant staff and rock and roll that will bring you back to when the music was real, the hair was long, and the guitars were rocking. Get your party on at the Moose Vancouver, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother Is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother Is Watching.
From the heartlands of Canada to beards around the world, we know how to take care of you. Fill your follicles with the Mighty Moose Beard Oil. All our oils and balms are handmade and 100% natural ingredients because we care about your beard. And hey, use the promo code SOR2019 and get your Mighty Moose Beard Oil today. You can check us out on our website, mightymoosebeard.com.
At spacedoutradio.com, we have a little bit of everything for you to stay up late. So while you're there, check out our SOR Newswire, where our team brings you stories of the weird and strange to the WTF from around the globe. News on Bigfoot, UFOs, paranormal, Darwinian-type crime tales. It's the stories that the mainstream media usually won't touch. Well, we got them all on the SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Come hang out with Spaced Out Radio, where we own the night. This is Carl. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and during the show, use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio to chat with us live. On Instagram, at Dave Scott SOR. On Facebook, give our page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. SOR archives are free on YouTube at Spaced Out Radio. Come join us, or I will come join you. See you at your window.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
We are getting ready to relaunch the SOR Space Travelers Club at spacedoutradio.com. For $5 a month, you can join us for a plethora of features found nowhere else. Hang out in a private chat room during the show and after party. You can check out some exclusive content and a store specifically for you, as well as a private listener forum where you can post your thoughts, stories, and pictures. The SOR Space Travelers Club, coming soon to spacedoutradio.com.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott, and I'm bringing you the woo every Monday through Friday on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going all out to bring you the strangest, oddest stories and subjects I could find for your entertainment. Why? Because when we hit peak woo, I know I've done my job. So come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com, 9:06 Pacific, 12:06 a.m. Eastern, and together, my friends, we own the night.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Sunday. I'm your host, Everett Thiemer, and thanks for being with us through all the audio issues and sound issues. But we're going to keep going. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates, KDNF-AM 1560 in Dangerfield, Texas, KDUN-AM 1030 in Ridgecrest, Oregon, KZFX 93.7 FM in Ridgecrest, California. The other one was in Reedsport, Oregon. WQEE in 99.1 FM in Noonan, Georgia, and UPRN 107.7 FM in New Orleans. On the digital side, we are on Kingdom of Nye Radio and Revolution Radio. And don't forget, you can check out all of our archives at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where you can find a plethora of features, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shop at the Spaced Out Radio store, and read up on the SOR Newswire, where you can find Dave's blog that you really, really need to read. So anyway, Denver, let's finish up a little bit here with the Giants, and then let's move on to a couple other things.
Okay.
So we were talking a little bit during the break about, I don't want to sound confrontational, but 7 foot, even in a time where people may have been shorter, 7 foot is not, to me, a giant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, split hairs over that, but there's been a lot of reports of skeletons much larger than that. I mean, 9 foot, 10 foot, even 12 foot here and there. But there have been a lot, in the West Virginia area, of the 7 foot, and it just seems like for as many 7 foot skeletons as have supposedly been recovered, that's just an abnormal amount of at least really tall people, and they're robust, like tall and robust, not like that they're 7 foot tall and that they've got some sort of abnormality that they're so tall.
Okay, what is the average size of what they would consider a giant? Because I've seen reports. It's tough to believe some of them because they range. I think I've seen 19 feet, 20 feet.
Oh, I've seen like up to 36 feet, and and you're right. I mean, that does seem a stretch, but there are a lot of reports of up to 12 feet, and that still seems a lot. I mean, if you consider Goliath from the Bible, the way that he was described, I mean, using conservative estimates, he would have been at like 9'9". So that's just just a couple inches shorter than than a regulation basketball rim. So that's a big boy, So it's hard for us to fathom, but the more you dig into this stuff, there's there's a lot of those kind of reports. There's then there's the legends, the myths, things like that, and all over West Virginia, there's reports of just these massive skulls and jaw bones that would fit over top of a normal person's face. There's one that I saw just across the river from Wheeling over in Ohio, of a skull so large that people could slide it over their head like a helmet. And a lot of these these old newspaper reports and things, it's spoken of very matter of factly, whereas to you and I, it might sound like something, when we were kids, of what you'd see in, if you remember, going to the grocery store with your mom, you'd see all the tabloids with Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and it's all embellished. It might seem like something like that, but in the newspaper reports from back then, a lot of this stuff was spoken of very matter of factly.
Now, is this something that's worldwide, or is it kind of centralized here in the U.S., or what's the history on it a little bit?
I mean, I would say that a lot of it is pretty much worldwide, but it seems like North America, and especially in, I would say, the Ohio Valley, seems to be kind of ground zero almost for it. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of a worldwide thing. You hear of European giants, down in South America, and you don't really hear as much in Asia, but there are reports or at least legends and things from China and stuff like that. But the South Pacific, there's those legends, and even today there's the supposed stories of a possible giants that live in this real remote interior in the mountains of the Solomon Islands. Even
they're currently living there.
I mean, that's what some people claim. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to that, but it is interesting. I mean, I've seen supposed footprints. There was even an ancient alien show that said some construction workers were working on the Solomon Islands, and one of their bulldozer blades had been moved, and there were some giant tracks or something like that. So who knows? There's just those rumblings. I can think of also the tales of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, maybe supposedly killing a giant in a cave over there. It's those things you can't verify, but you hear or read about from site to site and things like that. You don't know how much weight to put into it.
Okay, yeah, I've been curious about them, but I don't know that the evidence has convinced me yet. I don't accept that a 7-foot tall person, even back when our height was on average shorter, it's hard to make that jump to 7 feet being a giant. It could just be a genetic mutation that was caused by a variety of different things.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but it does seem to me like even if there were some sort of mutation or something, it seemed to be that, at least there was this population that it existed through, almost like a bloodline or what have you. And then when you have when you have at least the reports of these kind of remains, which, we can't look at these bones now, or we don't know what happened to them. But when you have these reports, but then you also have the myths and the legends, that talk of giants and things like that, that to me corroborates it a little bit.
Right. Okay. So tell me, let's shift gears here a little bit and tell me about your new book.
Yeah, my latest book. It's a little bit like the one we were just talking about with Atlantic City. This one, I kind of chronicled a trip that I took to. So I flew into El Paso and drove up to Roswell and then down to Las Cruces and back to El Paso and flew home. It's just this big loop that I drove. But along the way, I visited a lot of cool places like Hueco Tanks, which is about 30 minutes outside of El Paso. I went to Carlsbad Caverns, White Sands. Of course, spent a good bit of time in Roswell. Went to the Three Rivers petroglyph site, which is probably about an hour north of White Sands in New Mexico. Just a lot of kind of must-see places, but at the same time, they're rich in some some cool tales of so unexplained type things.
Like what?
Well, there's a lot of the lost mines around there kind of tales. There's some cool cryptids. There's some classic UFO cases. Like for instance, in White Sands. So, I'm hiking around White Sands and I'm thinking, wow, look at where I'm standing. I'm looking off at the San Andreas Mountains, like right in front of me. And over to my right, there's Holloman Air Force Base. So in the San Andreas Mountains, there's Victorio Peak. And in there's the tales of a lost mine. This is one of those strange tales. It's been documented in a lot of other books. But at any rate, there's this guy named... His nickname is Doc. His last name is Nos, and he was out hunting, and climbed up on top of a mountaintop to get a better view, and it started raining, and he took shelter under an overhang, but he found this stone that looked like it had been worked, and he moved the stone. Went down, and at any rate, he came back later, but he went down into this shaft, and when he got down there, he found all these skeletons that were chained to the ground, and I think it was like 27 in number. I could be wrong, but I think it was like 27. But anyway, there were these Wells Fargo chests. There was like all this treasure, this weird lighting. It's just one of those weird stories that him and his wife was involved. He ended up like in 1949 getting gunned down by a business associate, and his wife had trouble getting a hold of the treasure. The Army ended up taking possession of the land as White Sands missile range expanded, and even the famous lawyer F. Lee Bailey was involved in this. It's just one of those really, cool stories, and I'm just like hiking along, and I'm kind of weird. I just kind of like think about stuff like that when I'm when I'm hiking and stuff. But then off to the right, there's Holloman Air Force Base, and there are reports in the 60s of a UFO being in one of the hangars there. And the cool thing about that is the UFO had a strange insignia, supposedly, that the from the Zamora case, which happened in Socorro, Mexico. North of there, it's just one of those weird cases where a police officer saw a UFO and described it as having some kind of strange insignia on it. So there's just a lot of weirdness around the White Sands area there, at least.
Now, with the skeletons chained up, do they or have they ever been able to, through DNA or birth and death records, been able to identify any of these people?
Well, see, that's one of those things is like nobody's really been able to totally confirm these kind of stories. Like I was saying a minute ago, the Army, when White Sands expanded, after the war and all of that, White Sands, if you look on a map, that is huge. I mean, it's like, if you took the square mileage, I mean, it's probably, I'm just guessing, but it's probably like Delaware or Rhode Island or something. It's huge. And they took over that land, and Doc Noss's wife, Ova, hired lawyers and fought the Army, to get, to be able to get back into, their supposed claim, and, nothing ever came of it. So it's just one of those things. It's like a cool story, but that's about it.
Now, you're not a real big UFO kind of guy, but yet you went to Roswell. Did it change your opinions, thoughts, or what did you come away from Roswell with?
I mean, Roswell, as far as UFOs, I've always been extremely interested. I kind of study the stuff and, keep up with it to a degree. It's the people that kind of turn me off from UFOs. But what I came away with Roswell from is really, I'll tell you, man, it's really kind of like the same place I started. It's like it's almost kind of like I was talking about with the eDNA with Nessie. It's like, you learn a little bit more, but you're really at the exact same place you started. Like, to me, Roswell, I don't know what happened. I don't have a strong opinion what happened, but I do not think that it was just a weather balloon, right? And that's about as far as I'm willing to go with it. And after, visiting the museum and the area there, that's pretty much where I'm at. I'm not sure what happened. I don't know if alien bodies were recovered there or not. I've read a lot of books on Roswell, but I just don't know. It's hard to say.
Did you do any camping around Roswell? Did you spend the night there? Did you see anything weird in the sky, even during the day?
I didn't see anything myself out of the ordinary. I really didn't. The one night that I stayed right around Roswell, it came one of those, I guess out in that part of the world they call them monsoons, the North American monsoons. And it rained like horizontal. It was just a horrible rainstorm that night. And even if there were something flying around, you wouldn't have been able to see it through the rain and the thunderstorms anyway.
So you started this trip or you started documenting the trip in El Paso?
Yeah, we flew into El Paso and I just kind of took notes from there, I guess. I didn't know at the time, I had no idea this happened. I think it was 2017. And, at the time I had no idea that I was going to write a book or anything, but that's just kind of like kind of how I roll. I always take notes about things and, log things down, and, I just never know what I'm going to do with it.
So what's the biggest haunting in El Paso?
In El Paso, there's, it not being a local, there might be some cool things that I don't even know about, but like Waco Tanks is just outside of El Paso, and it's a pretty cool place. You go there, and it's just kind of like this rock pile right in the middle of the desert, and there's just like all these pictograms just painted all over the walls, and if I'm remembering correctly, it's like the largest collection of like the, like masks, like ceremonial type masks, painted, on the rocks there, of maybe like anywhere in North America, or it was the Mugyan people, and they left petroglyphs not far from there, and up in New Mexico, and they were just like really prolific rock artists. But anyway, in Waco Tanks, there've been these reports of these masks painted on the walls that on the rocks there, that have come to life. I mean, like, people have reported apparitions that look like these rock paintings, and to me that was just an amazing, just very cool thing to learn about. And of course, not being from the area, I've not been able to investigate it any further. But that area, there's just such a, when you visit there, it was a very sacred place to the people, because those rocks there, a lot of them have these freshwater, the rainwater will collect like inside these rocks, and that's why people would gather there in ancient times, and it was a very sacred place. And, so there's just this real energy there. And then to learn about these apparitions was just fascinating.
Did you get to explore any mounds? I know that you like the burial mounds and things like that. Did you get to see any of those or find any of those?
I didn't. I don't know if there's really any of those in the desert out there. I've read a lot in that area, remains found like in some of the cliffs and some of the cliff dwellings and things like that in New Mexico. But I hadn't really heard of anything like that.
So you left El Paso, and did you go directly to Roswell?
Well, we stopped off in Carlsbad, visited Carlsbad Caverns, and then in the Guadalupe Mountains, just before the New Mexico line in Texas. We did some hiking around there. The highest point in Texas is there, Guadalupe Peak. So I hiked to the top of that, and then after we did all that, we went on up to Roswell and spent some time in that neck of the woods.
And what took you to Las Cruces? Why was it just a random thing, or was there a particular reason for going there?
Well, it's just after I visited, I kind of planned the trip out. Like after I visited Roswell, I wanted to go to Las Cruces because, White Sands is not very far from there. I can't remember how long it takes to drive there, but it's not very far. Maybe it's less than an hour. I mean, it might only be like 45 minutes or something. And so that was kind of the reason. I figured, go to the White Sands area, and spend a little bit of time in Las Cruces. The Oregon mountains are just amazing and beautiful in Las Cruces. And I had read a lot of reports about Thunderbirds, in the Oregon mountains. And it's like someplace I just felt like I needed to go,
Don't they have a lot of cave paintings of thunderbirds out in that area?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just one of those things that are just kind of really kind of all over the place in North America, but not too far from Las Cruces is that the Three Rivers petroglyph site, and I guess it's like maybe an hour from there. But anyway, I went out there, and supposedly there's 21,000 petroglyphs there. And, when you go walking out there, and again, kind of like Hueco Tanks, it's just kind of like this rock pile just out in the middle of nowhere. And there's just, no matter where you look, there's just hundreds of these petroglyphs all around you. There's just all kinds of motifs. There's these spirals. There's these lizard-looking creatures. There's bird-looking creatures. There's some things that you got no idea what it is, and then there's some things you see, and I mean, you literally feel like you've been dropped into an Ancient Aliens episode almost. It's just these things that look like they're like from outer space or something almost. You got no idea what they mean, but it's amazing to to walk through these places and to see all this rock art.
Did you get to talk to anybody about the history of some of these, or meet some of the people maybe from the tribes that created them and learn about them a little bit?
I did not really get to, talk to anybody that, that really knew a heck of a lot about them. I stopped at the Mescalero Museum in Mescalero, New Mexico, and I don't know for sure if if their ancestors might have been a part of the culture that, it's kind of weird, like the culture that did a lot of that rock art just kind of almost just disappeared from the area. So you don't know exactly if the people that are there now are, necessarily related to them or not. So it's kind of hard to know.
When you were in Las Cruces, did you get to do any research on ghosts or maybe some of the Native American legends?
I mean, a little bit. There's I didn't get to stay in Las Cruces as much as I'd like. Most of what I learned around there was like another lost mine story. There's a story of Father Felipe LaRue that like right around 1600 thereabouts, learned of a mine from a dying Spanish soldier, and he recruited local Indians and also priests from Chihuahua, Mexico, and he drafted them to come up, and they were mining an area. And some people think it was right around Las Cruces. Some people think it was in the San Andreas Mountains. And then there's any number of tales of where this treasure is. But at any rate, he was apparently, him and his people were apparently, had a pretty good stash of ore that they were collecting out of there. And they were, smelting it and making coins and bars. And,
now, all of these mines, were they gold mines, silver mines, copper, mix of different things?
This one was supposedly a gold mine. There's some in like in El Paso where they were, had gold and silver. So, it just depends. But gold and silver. But, yeah, you hear of copper, too. But this one, supposedly they were fashioning gold coins and gold bars, and they needed supplies. So Father LaRue went into the nearest town and purchased what he needed. But the Spanish authorities, found out, because back then you had to, whatever you mined, 20% had to go back to the crown in Spain. It was known as the Royal Fifth. And so obviously he wouldn't pay in that. And, a group of soldiers followed him to the mine, or, whatever. They closed up the entrance to the mine, and he was tortured, and his companions were tortured, but never gave up the location. And to this day, people are still looking for it. So there's a lot of those stories in that part of the world.
How much do you think this treasure is worth in today's dollars?
I mean, I don't know. I do not know off the top of my head what gold is worth now, but, it's it's hard to say because you don't know how much is there, and there's just all of these stories. I would say it's in the billions if I were just taking a guess.
So are people actively looking for this?
Oh, there's tons of people out there that are looking for these treasures. You hear all the time, like in El Paso in the Franklin Mountains there's another one of those supposed lost mines, and during the Pueblo Indian Revolt, that a lot of the friars that had mines, that they had to stash their bars and treasure, and some of it they were able to carry out and some of it not. But you always hear people coming up with theories where this or that treasure is, and you never know. Probably a History Channel show.
Now, back when these mines were originated, they would have been generally, on government land, not so much private land?
Well, back then, I mean, it would have been just unclaimed lands, kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, not that I'm planning a road trip or anything, but are they on public land now? Are they on private? Are they all pretty much claimed? Like back in the day, you could establish a claim to a mine. Is that still? Do they still do that out there?
Well, a lot of them would be on public land now, because out in that part of the country, there's just vast tracts that are, managed by the Bureau of Land Management, or, they're protected in one way or the other.
Are there any good ghost stories from some haunted mines?
Yeah, there's there's several, but there's one that I'm thinking of. It's around the San Andreas Pass. You kind of, like when you're driving to Las Cruces from White Sands, I think that is Route 70, I think. I think that's what it is. Anyway, who cares what the road number is? But
I kind of do, because I might be planning a road trip here.
Yeah, I'd have to have my map, but I think it's 70. But anyway, it's in between like White Sands and Las Cruces. There's a place known as the San Andreas Pass, and so if you're heading to Las Cruces, off to the right part of the pass, there's a story of a rancher that had followed some cattle thieves, and he ended up there was a snowstorm, and he took shelter underneath like in a cave. And he ended up stumbling on, some ore and gold bars, and he took some out with him. And, supposedly like this place is haunted. And most of these places, I think even the place we were talking about earlier, where Doc Noss found the 27 skeletons chained to the ground, supposedly these places are haunted, and that would make sense. I mean, with the with 27 people being chained to the ground and dying.
Now, is that proven? Do they have evidence of that, or is that just kind of a myth or legend that's sort of evolved over the years?
And as far as I know, nothing is proven as far as I know. I mean, and I don't know how you would even prove anything like that. You know, it'd be hard to even find the locations of some of these places, really, you know.
Right. So what's the cryptid out there that you're going to explore? Because they don't have a lot of water monsters, I don't think.
Well, there is one thing that I was interested in out there, like just to the southeast, I think, of Roswell. There's a state park. It's the Bottomless Lakes State Park. And there's, if I'm not mistaken, there's 9 lakes, and no, maybe there's 11. There's either 9 or 11 lakes. But anyway, most of them are within a state park. But anyway, in these lakes, there's these tales of giant turtles, and by giant turtles I mean like turtles that have been described like the size of Volkswagens, you know, in the past. And so I went out there, just you know, kind of like hung out there, you know, kind of got up on a bluff and, you know, watched over because you can see like a couple of lakes like from one of the bluffs, and one of the lakes is like a public recreational area. You know, there's like a beach and people swim, but the rest of them nobody swims in. So I was just kind of watching to see if I could see anything, but of course I didn't find nothing. And you know, about all I heard or learned about was hearsay about these turtles. But you know, there were. You can kind of look them up on the internet, and it's all kind of the same thing. It was like back in the 80s, there were these reports of Volkswagen-sized turtles, and like one guy saying that, you know, he was in a boat, and one of them came toward him, and it looked like the Loch Ness Monster was trying to get him and stuff like that. But there's also a rumor of like an octopus, excuse me, like a half octopus, half man that's been spotted on the shores of the lakes, and just kind of some weird tales like that. But I certainly wasn't able to corroborate any of it.
When you say a turtle the size of a Volkswagen, do you think that ideas like that help or hurt the crypto field? I mean, in this day and age where everything is almost immediately photographed and put on some form of social media, and you're reaching back to these tales from the 80s and stuff, do you think they're valid and that we're just not seeing reports anymore? Or are we still seeing reports? And what do you think that does to the field?
I mean, as far as the field itself, you know, cryptozoology, I mean, it probably hurts more than it helps, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, like a turtle that large, I think probably could exist, but I don't think it's going to exist in a lake, in lakes that are that small. You know, that would probably be something that you would see in the oceans, not in these lakes that are, you know, several. I can't remember how big the lakes are, but they're not, I mean, we're not talking about something like Lake Champlain. I mean, we're just talking about these smaller lakes. I mean, they're pretty deep, but they're not that big as far as their surface area. So I don't even know what turtles that size would eat, in something like that. So, I mean, it probably hurts, but, I'm one of those guys. I mean, I don't really care if it hurts or if it helps or this or that. I'm not one of these guys that is a self-appointed defender of the field, like a lot of people try to put their capes on and protect the field that they're interested in. I'm not really like that. I don't really care. So I think it's all kind of interesting, and it is what it is.
What else is out there?
Well, I mean, out there in that part of the world, one of the things that I didn't really know about this until I got home, but so driving from Roswell to Las Cruces, I kind of took the long way, but only by a few miles, and I drove through the Mescalero Apache Reservation.
There's a short way?
Well, by like 4 miles. Like the way that Google Maps recommended, and then I looked at the second option and like, oh, it's 4 miles longer and takes 2 minutes longer. I'll just go this way. And it goes through the Mescalero Reservation, and that was pretty amazing because, when you're in that part of New Mexico, and I was out there in July, and it's just brutally hot and just a brown barren landscape. But as you get closer to the Mescalero Reservation, your altitude is gaining, and the closer you get, things get greener and greener. And by the time you cross, into their borders, you're just in the middle of these lush, just large pine forests and everything. And, I was just thinking to myself, and the temperature, is pleasant, that time of year. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, wow, look at this place. And I'm like, I wonder if there's any Bigfoot, here. And, I didn't really think a whole lot about it till I got home. And then I'm like, let me go on the, the Bigfoot Field Researchers organization website, because they've got a good database, broken down by state and county of sightings and things. And just in and around the reservation there, I found like 10 sightings, and 5 of them were what they call Class A, and you define Class A as something where, there's little to no chance of, misidentifying a bear as a Bigfoot. It's like you pretty much know what you saw, and I was pretty shocked. And then I did a little more, looking around on their website, and they actually had a report on the Mescalero Reservation there about the Bigfoot, and that they had actually done quite a bit of research out there, and it was pretty fascinating to read. And apparently the Mescalero people have their own word for Bigfoot. I think they called it Kensaw. And that they were very open to the idea that something like that existed on their lands.
Well, you don't think of forests so much when you think of that area. And are there any other kind of legends coming out of those forests, or creatures coming out of those forests?
I mean, I'm not real familiar with anything else in that area, but probably if I spend a little more time down there, I'm sure that there's all kinds of things.
So, what else did you find in Las Cruces?
Well, for the most part, I was just exploring the Thunderbird reports. There had been several. I think around the 2005, 2007. I might be getting my numbers mixed up, but there had been a long, kind of a pretty long history in that part of New Mexico of these Thunderbird sightings, kind of like we were talking about in West Virginia earlier. You got a couple that were, it sounded almost like, pterodactyls or something. And you got others that, these birds with 20-foot wingspans and black feathers, and there was several reports in the, I want to say it was like the around 2005, and then not too long after that, there were a couple, down around the San Antonio area in Texas. So it seemed like something went through that area, and who knows? It might have been on its way somewhere. Who knows?
Now, you were in sort of chupacabra territory there. Did you get to see any evidence of them, talk to anybody about them, have any experiences with them while you were traveling those dusty roads?
No, I didn't get to learn much about that, to be honest with you. And it's that and the chupacabras, we were kind of mentioned earlier. It seems like there's almost like two different types. I think the actual chupacabras are more what you hear about from Puerto Rico. The 3-foot tall, almost kind of kangaroo-like, but kind of scaly, rather than most of what you hear out of Texas and Mexico. Is they just sound more like hairless dogs, but like big, kind of gross-looking hairless dogs.
What do you think of the idea that they might just be sort of a sick coyote?
I mean, that sounds like a pretty good explanation, but who knows? You see the like the pictures that people have taken of them and things like that. It almost seems like that they've got like this almost like a spiny ridge running down their backbone in a lot of cases, and I don't really know how to explain some of the weird things with them like that.
I'm disappointed that you didn't see one down there or experience one down there. I'm a little surprised, but then again, have they ever found the bodies they've tested? Have they ever confirmed or not denied, but what's the results on the DNA on those?
I don't remember. I know that there was one from Texas that they did do DNA on. I cannot remember the results, but it wasn't where it was anything like earth shattering, like we've found a new cryptid kind of thing. I think if I remember right, it was more kind of like coyote with mange kind of thing. I could be speaking out of turn, but again, you're like me. You're in an area for a week or two. It's a proverbial needle in a haystack to really gain any ground on finding out about a local cryptid.
Are you going to go back there anytime soon and investigate a little more?
Oh, I would like to go back. I don't know. I mean, it won't be this year, probably won't be next, but I'll definitely be back.
Now, we got about 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so. Tell me a little bit about your trip that you took this summer. Up towards Maryland?
Well, this summer I went. This summer, me and the wife went out to Ohio and visited a bunch of the mounds out there. And earlier in the year, we went out to Nevada and California. And we actually went out to the Area 51 gate when we were out there. But the summer trip was kind of a mound exploration trip that I'd been wanting to do.
Okay. And are you going to maybe make a book out of it, write a book out of this one and make it another one of your series?
I might. It's like one of those ideas that I got in the back of my head. I'd been out to some of those mounds in Ohio before, but and I've been to a lot of the ones in West Virginia quite a few times. But this time I got to visit some of the ones that I hadn't before. Like we went out to the Miamisburg Mound, which is right outside of Dayton, and I think that's the biggest mound in Ohio. And that thing is just massive. I mean, it was just amazing. And we visited Fort Ancient, which is not too far, maybe like probably not even an hour, like 45 minutes from Cincinnati. We visited Serpent Mound, which I had been to before, but this time I spent a little extra time there. And,
Denver, we're just about out of time. Can you tell everybody where they can find your information, your books, and your upcoming events and what you're going to be up to next?
Yeah, sure. Just go to my website, denvermichaels.net. You can look me up on Facebook at author Denver Michaels, _Denver Michaels on Twitter. And if anybody's in the Morgantown, West Virginia area, I'll be at a conference October 12th out there. It's free to the public, and it's WV Case Paranormal Expo. So look that up on Facebook.
Well, thank you, Denver. I really appreciate you putting up with all the troubles that we did here and all the issues we had. I want to thank you for coming.
It was an honor to be your first guest, man. I appreciate it.
Probably my last, too. All right, we got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. A special thank you to everyone listening at home, in your cars, at work, and in our chat rooms, where I paid absolutely no attention because I have no idea what I'm doing. And wherever else you may be. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you for sharing your evening with us.